this.
Hello. Shalom. I don't know hello in any other languages. Thank you all for coming again to another Thursday night here at B Street. I think most of us have coined Fridays as Hungover Friday now. Sorry to all the patrollers that have to work. I have to work tomorrow too, I know. Anyways, we still have a big line, and that's okay. And the house is full. But with no further ado, we're going to introduce JT Robinson. He's been skiing in the Ogden Mountains since he was like 12. That's not true. He was 18. He bleeds purple. He's a Weber State grad. He's been guiding in the mountains here in Ogden for, I don't know, how old are you? 30 years? That puts him at 48. I don't know if that's even close or not. It's close enough. He also works for Inspired Summit Adventures in the Uintas as a telemark ski guide, and works for Monument on the other side of that ridge from you guys at Powder. Don't look over there. Just don't look at it. Yep. And he doesn't telemark there because he's not allowed to. But he's a man of many hats and prominent backcountry skier here in Ogden, and we appreciate him talking about terrain tonight. Give him a warm welcome.
Got that pretty much right. These days I don't count years anymore. I just say I'm a local crusty old ski guide. Washed up telemark pro from back in the day. Yeah. But I've been in these mountains for 25 years, almost 30. Corey got that right. I showed up when I was 18. And yeah, exactly. Cheese here. Everything, yeah. I jump 3 mid-second balls in the dominant position. But I'm really excited to do this presentation today. Here. My time to the Ogden Avalanche, folks. These guys do good things, so let's give a little round of applause for Corey in the game. Having been in the Ogden Range for 25 years and being a crusty old ski guide now, I got opinions. So I got some stuff to say. But we'll start out with terrain stuff. And so you can obviously see the title, terrain, and a growing Ogden backcountry community, which any of y'all that have been here for more than a few years have probably started to notice that our community is growing. And the one thing we all control is the terrain that we decide to use when we're out there together. So I'll start out with kind of the classic, like Area 1 terrain stuff and do a little review for a lot of folks on what kind of stuff we look for in the terrain. And then near the end, I kind of start to devolve into more of my crusty old ski guide ranty stuff near the end, but we'll have some fun with that, hopefully. My opinions are not those of the Ogden Avalanche and the Roosters B Street staff. Is that a disclaimer I should probably enter? So I got to sit here in this chair because of the microphone. I usually like walk around and get all weird, but I'm going to be stationary. So yeah, so to get into the thing, terrain. We all hear the word all the time, and the key with terrain is that the terrain we choose is how we manage the hazard in the backcountry. That's from avalanche perspective as well as a lot of other things. But when you look at the avalanche triangle that we talk about in Area 1 and all that stuff, and I should disclaimer, I'm an area instructor. So like, obviously you can see all my area slides. I don't build anything that I can't always also use in my avalanche courses too. But so you think about avalanche terrain, that's the one lever that we actually have control of as backcountry skiers. You've got unstable snow on the other side of the avalanche triangle, and you've got the trigger, which we don't know where that's going to be or if it's even going to be us. You've got the unstable snow that obviously there's nothing we can do about that. We track it. We do all the sciencey stuff we can to try to think about what the unstable snow is going to be. But really the only lever we have control of is that terrain lever. And that's why these avalanche courses that you guys take really beat terrain into your head. And we hear that word all the time because that is the thing that we actually have control of. So the first thing when we talk about terrain is slope angle. This is kind of just review stuff for some of you, or maybe you're hearing it for the first time, but we've got this Goldilocks range right here. They call the prime range for avalanche terrain. 30 to 45 is this range. Below 30, we're saying it's not quite steep enough to slide. Above 45, it's so steep that a lot of times this snow is just sloughing down. It doesn't really get the chance to accumulate like it does in that Goldilocks zone of 30 to 45. These ranges aren't exactly like if you ski a 29-degree slope, you can still get an avalanche on 29-degree slope or 28. I've heard rumors of fabled Uinta avalanches in like the 26 world, but it's a guideline and it's pretty accurate. So it's something we kind of use to really try to round that out. And when you're looking at slope angles, there's a lot of different ways to do it. One thing that we have these days that's really beneficial are these really nice computer apps like CalTopo and Gaia. Onyx Backcountry now is a new one I've been hearing about a bunch. These things can be really helpful. You can see in this map where you've got the classic topographic lines we all know and love. But now like CalTopo, you've got like slope angle shading and things like that you can layer on top to start to figure out the slope angles in the places that you like to ski. You've also got inclinometers and your laser eyes. That's when I would teach avalanche courses. I'm always stopping students in the skin track and pointing at a slope and be like, pop quiz, laser eye, what's that slope angle? And then I get all these numbers like 26, 32, 29, 38. And I have them pull out their inclinometer then and actually measure it, because being able to use just your naked eye to start to figure out slope angles and get yourself in the realm of close is a really great tool to have as you're moving through terrain, because you've got like big general slope angle issues that you're thinking of, but you've also got like micro terrain issues. And so being able to recognize a 30 plus, 32, 38 degree slope, be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go around that this time. You can get your laser eyes trained in to within 3 or 4 degrees. You can really start to make yourself really efficient as you're moving through terrain. So then you get into the actual wilderness and you get vegetation clues. These things are good. You can see in this picture, you've got really well-defined avalanche paths over here in the trees. And why do we know that those are well-defined avalanche paths in the trees? Yeah. There's places where there's no trees. So a very large avalanche rips through there and rips out mature trees. So if you start seeing things out in the world, like this tree broken off, or even more subtly, this little diagram over here on the right is on the uphill side, where you're getting avalanches that come through. They're not so big that they're taking the whole tree down, but they're knocking all those branches off the uphill side. We call that flagging. And so that's something else you'll see when you're walking around. That's going to give you indications about, are you in avalanche terrain or are you not? So just a little bit of review here with the parts of an avalanche. You've got the start zone, or where it typically initiates, the run out zone, and then where it stops and the deposition is. Because when we start to evaluate terrain, we're looking at all kinds of different things within the terrain. So the first thing we talk about is the aspect of sun. So in this picture, you can see you've got the sunny side here that this guy's getting his rad turns on, and he's super stoked. And in the back there, you've got the shady, north-facing, cold snow terrain, which we all know and love. But as we think about that aspect of sun in the terrain, if it's a south face or like a southeast face, you're going to get a lot more sun. You're going to get a lot more warming. Snowpack hates rapid change. So the aspects that face the sun are going to act differently than these aspects that stay in the shade more often, like that north-facing, cold, sweet alpine goodness in that picture. Another thing we think about is the aspect of wind. Here in Ogden, and especially any of you folks that work at Snow Basin, know this one all too well. I think the loving nickname for Snow Basin has become Blow Basin because it is, yeah. You're thinking of it in the wrong context. Yeah, it's because of the wind. Yeah, not where your head's going. It's because of the wind. Yeah, it's because of the wind. Yeah, exactly. Not what you're thinking about. Snow Basin gets tons of wind. And why does it get all that wind? It's because it's right there on that front of the range. So all these big winds, big storms and stuff come across the desert, all that wind, and they run right into Snow Basin right away. Those winds go ripping up that west face. And if you're on the ridgeline at Strawberry on one of those days, you remember that kind of day because it blows. Oh, yeah, big old wind cornices, right? Exactly. We'll get to cornices in another time. So you can see here in this picture, you've got the windward, just like the west face of Mount Ogden, and then the leeward side here where it all fills up. I'm good. I'm half full. Thanks, Cam. Cam's always looking out for me. So we move into trigger points. This is always a tough one because you never really know where these are going to be. Some of you that work ski patrol and have institutional knowledge start to see these kinds of things. But these are typically going to be found in shallow spots or convex rolls is another good one you'll find it. You see here as the slope starts to roll and starts to reach that prime angle, that's where then this avalanche rips out on that convex roll. Trees and shallow rocks can often be trigger points. And so you'll think of it kind of from the perspective of like perforated along the dotted line, like when you tear along the line kind of thing. You can see in this picture, the slide kind of run, or the crown kind of goes from like rock to rock to rock. And in the diagram over on the side there, you can kind of see why, because that's that shallow point where you can affect that weak layer and it can propagate across into deeper parts. So you'll find that with trees, you'll find that with rocks, and you also find that similar effect with cliffs and cornices as well. And so right underneath the cliff or right underneath the lee side of the cornice, you'll get these thin spots as well that often serve as trigger points. And then rocks also have a tendency to heat up in the sun, and with snowpack not liking rapid change, you get those hot rocks. That's where you'll start to see a lot of that wet loose and stuff like that off those hot rocks. So then you think about trigger points and where the slides are going to start. Then we want to move into terrain traps and where the slides are going to end up. Yeah, so you can see this diagram here. The slide occurs up top, but then comes into this serial bowl concavity, and it's going to bury you incredibly deep. We had a avalanche fatality in the Farmington area with a snowmobiler a few years back where everybody was prepared. The kid had a bag, they had beacons, everybody had all the things and the preparation and the education, but the kid got caught in a slide and ended up in a terrain trap and was buried some crazy number, like 12 feet deep or something like that. And everybody was on top of him quite quickly and dug and dug and dug and dug. But if you can think about having to dig 12 feet deep, it took quite a long time and wasn't quick enough to save him. So these terrain traps serve as consequence multipliers. And so that's something you always want to think about. I do this with my guide clients every once in a while just to keep them on their toes. But we'll come up to something and get all ready and get in to start dropping to ski things, discuss the line and do things like that. And then I'll just go, okay, what are you going to do if this whole thing rips and you're in the middle of that? And they kind of look at me all crazy eyed, like, isn't that why I hired you, was to handle that situation? And that's what I'm like, yeah, you did, but I've gotten this wrong like 6 times in my own life. And so what's the plan if I'm wrong this time? And it kind of, we have a good laugh about it and we talk about it, because then we start talking about, you know, if you have something happen, how are you going to get out? Where are you going to go? And all these different things. Because the terrain traps in things of that nature in the line are just as important as the start zone issues. A lot of folks that are here have spent a bunch of time in the backcountry, and you realize that we're really just stacking probabilities in our favor so that our mistakes we do make don't get us killed. And it gets a little deep and dark when I start going in that direction. But that's the kind of things we need to think about, because if you're out there long enough, you probably will get it wrong, and you'll have your chance to dance. And if you end up in the bottom of a cereal bowl in a gully like that, which we have plenty of these here in our Ogden Mountains, that's something you need to be thinking about, and how you feel about skiing that line. This gully right here looks awful lot like one down underneath like the Ben Lomond head wall or something like that. So we have a lot of these kinds of things. We definitely have a bunch of creeks, and we definitely have a bunch of trees, not including all of our scrub oak and our famous bush skiing that we have here in Ogden. I call it the Louisville Slugger Factory. You got to ask yourself if you want to take a tour of the Louisville Slugger Factory on some of these bushy exits that we have here in Ogden. Okay, so now I'm going to go into like a little bit of like interactive scenario type situation. So got a little bit of a review from some of that basic stuff we just talked about with terrain. And so these are kind of some of the big things to think about as you're going through and you're kind of planning out where you want to ski. And so I pull this from where we're talking about planning in the Area 1 course. But so here's a map of some terrain here in Ogden. Relatively famous, if the Snow Basin folks might know it a little more than the others. See, hey, I'm a Snow Basin guy from way back, man. Yeah, right. So this is a kind of a famous zone just outside the Snow Basin periphery. I wonder if I can. I can't go to Deer Valley or else. So if you guys can see this well enough, go ahead and shout a few of these things out. If I go back here to these review things, can you pick out any of those features in this terrain that we were just talking about, be it subridges or start zones, slope angles? Yes. So what do you see right in here, coming right through the bottom of this? A massive terrain trap. Yeah, if you Snow Basin folks can see it, this is Hell's Canyon right in here, one of the more deadly avalanche zones we have in the Ogden Range. For a few years there, I was taking one a year. It's been pretty good out there in recent years. It's also gotten quite busy over the last 5 or 6 years as well. And so for any of you folks that do frequent that zone, there's quite a few more folks these days going in there. And so right down here in the bottom is a zone we lovingly call the cemetery, which kind of exactly exemplifies a terrain trap with its name all on its own. So the thing you can think about when you're thinking about your where you're going to be in your terrain is, do you really want to walk uphill through the cemetery on your way up to ski something in Hell's Canyon? Raise your hand if you want to walk up. We got a few brave souls. Yeah, exactly. The point being, This cemetery is a giant terrain trap where all of this huge avalanche terrain ends up being. So if you're thinking about your day walking uphill, you spend 90% of your day walking uphill. The last place you want to spend 90% of your day is completely exposed to the avalanche problem in Hell's Canyon, as well as now the growing number of people coming into Hell's Canyon from the ski resort. So if we move up a little further, you guys see any other of those features that we talked about that jump out on this map? Maybe it's the subridges. That's the one I always like. I really like this map because it's got these really well-defined subridges. And so when we're thinking about, we've got the slope angle shading turned on that map, so there's plenty of avalanche slope angles. There's plenty of terrain traps, but there's also plenty of subridges. And so anytime we're planning a tour, this is coming straight out of that Area 1 Blue Book right here, but the concept is still the same. We've got avalanche problems for the day that we're finding out from the UAC and from our institutional knowledge and stuff we've gathered along the way. And we take these avalanche problems of the day, and in the report and stuff like that, they'll tell you where these avalanche problems exist. So like, is it the PWL on all the upper north facing elevations, or is it a wind slab on east faces? All these different things. And so in this scenario, we're taking the avalanche problems of the day and we're going to put them on this map. And so what I did in this particular scenario is just to keep it simple for a presentation, but this particular day that I'm trying to make my tour plan and how I'm going to use this terrain, I'm just going to say my only real problem of the day is it's like this classic spring day where we've got some cold snow, but it's going to get warm quite quickly throughout the day in this like average mid-March kind of day. And so just to keep it simple, we have this one problem of rapid warming throughout the day. And so I went and I took that problem and I overlaid the problem on my map. And so I'm starting down here by the Maples parking lot down there. And I want to decide what slopes I'm happy to ski for the day. Well, we talked about Hell's Canyon and the insanity that has morphed into. Okay, maybe I'm ranting a little early, but I can't help it. It's the crusty thing. So I don't really want to deal with Hell's Canyon. I don't want to have any issues with people coming in there. So I'm just going to read that whole thing for the day. But I've got this nice, beautiful north-facing slope here that the people I hang out with call the Weber State. And it's basically northwest, north-facing, cold snow. And then I've got a little bit of southeast and southeast here and a little straight east there. So I've red lighted these south faces because if the problem of the day is rapid warming, that's where we're going to see those things. If you remember, we talked about aspect to the sun. That's catching all the sun of the day in this mid-March rapid warming scenario. And these north faces are those shady slopes, so they're not getting as hot, maybe just a little bit of circing, but that's going a little deep. So they're not getting as hot. So we've got cold snow. So I've green lighted this north, I've red lighted this south, and I've green lighted this north, we call it Green Acres, and then yellowed the east, red the south, and then threw a green light on a spot up there I call Time and Money. And now I've laid those avalanche problems on the slopes that I want to ski or don't want to ski on the map. And then I come in here and I think about the route that I actually want to take to get to these things. And so I kind of think about this from a few different perspectives. But when we talked about the subridges, that's another, like I said, why I love this map and why I like it for these scenarios, because these subridges jump out at you on this map. So we like these subridges to ascend. But I'm going to ski more than one lap a day or on this day. And I also maybe don't want to ski the exact same thing every day. So every run. And so not only am I going to lay out like my initial approach here in the dark blue, but I've also put in some of these light blue, what I call lap back tracks too, where I kind of put together my whole circuit of the day. And it does a couple things for me. It allows me to ski the terrain I want to ski, but it also allows me to observe terrain I want to observe throughout the day as well. And so if for my initial get up, I decide to come up here between Hell's in the Weber State, and I want to ski one in here into the Weber State, and I jump on this lap back track. I've labeled these east-facing slopes as yellow because I'm not quite sure how much of this heating throughout the day they're going to get, but I could ski them if it doesn't really get hot and I like the conditions. But I don't really know that unless I get a chance to actually see it. So if I ski this north and then I lap back up this nice little subridge here, I've got the south I don't really want to deal with, but I've also got this east right here that I can look at as I'm going up for my second lap. So as I ski my first lap and I start coming up, the rapid warming is going to start happening throughout the day, and I'm already getting an idea about how the more east-facing slopes are actually going to react to the sun. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the degree that you cut off? What your
Yeah, so just like I was like this with my courses, the correct answer to every avalanche question is it depends. But the question he asks is like, what slope angle am I cutting it off, right? And so the reason the answer is
no,
it.
I was asking temperature.
Oh, temperature, right?
Temperature-wise,
Okay.
you cut it off.
Yeah. So
So I'm asking for.
yeah, I'm following. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So.
Something in the sun and something.
Yep.
You want to ride once it gets to 35 degrees. It's like,
Totally. And so what I don't have for that is an actual degrees, but one thing you.
okay, I won't hold you responsible.
Yep. The one thing you want to look for, and it's your first indication of rapid warming, is you get roller balls start coming down the slope. You've probably seen that when you get that hot spring day, all of a sudden you start to see the roller balls coming down the slope and they start to gather snow as they go down. That's your first indicator that, hey, this slope's getting hot. I don't want to be on it or underneath it. And so if I'm coming up here and I'm seeing rollerballing on this south, then I'm probably coming up to my next north-facing line, and I'm going to ski that, and I'm going to stay in that area because it's not really underneath anything south and getting hot. And that's all part of what we're getting at is as these conditions change throughout the day, we're monitoring the conditions throughout the day, as well as this plan we've developed in the morning. And so if I ski my second lap here, what's that?
There's no degrees that we're doing.
There's a variety of different. Well, we know 32 is freezing, right? So there's a variety of degrees above freezing that things are going to start getting hot. Yeah, it depends. Yeah, you don't need to worry about if it's the. Well, yeah, it changes with elevation too. So you don't need to worry exactly about what degree it is, but you need to worry about seeing those signs of the warming. Thank you. So yeah, and then so second lap, I'm looking in here. I got a chance to see some east. I've got a nice north face slope there, and you can see the lap back. Then I've got another east choice, or I can keep moving. And so you think about this plan and how you use this terrain, not just from avalanche problems, but also then the circuit of throughout the day of how you actually want to use these things and the other terrain that you want to see throughout your day as well. And so that kind of brings us to a little bit of a segue here where we'll move a little bit into terrain use from the perspective of the avalanche hazard, but also start adding in a bit of the etiquette question as well. And it's something we haven't had to worry about in the Ogden Range for a long time because we were such a lonely little mountain range up here. But as all of you have started to notice, our backcountry community is getting larger and larger, and I personally welcome everybody into the fold, and I'm happy to see the people. Like I said earlier, you all welcomed me in, so who am I not to be the same kind of person to welcome all these new friends of ours in? But as we get busier and busier, etiquette things and how we use the terrain collectively as a community, as well as in relation to the avalanche problems, is going to become a bigger and bigger factor here in the Ogden Range. I don't know how many of you spend much time down in the Cottonwoods, but it has gotten quite busy down there the last 10-ish years. Yeah, the Los Angeles moniker is fitting. I still love it down there. If you're willing to walk 3 hours, you can still have a very lonely experience in the Cottonwoods. But if you're hitting the usual suspects, you're with about 1 million of your friends from Salt Lake City. But that being said, there's a few things that Salt Lake City does pretty well that we could learn from. And there's also some things that Salt Lake City does that I really hope we don't pick up as well. But that's, yeah, we'll go, yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, orange peels and being in the skin track. Yeah. The Utah Backcountry Skiing Forum is quite an entertaining place. Yeah, but we also have the Northern Wasatch one and an Ogden Forum as well now, if you haven't seen those. But they're a little less sporty as the Salt Lake one. But so the first thing, and so we talked about this, and this is more about avalanche exposure when we talked about it earlier when we were looking at the map and all these sub-ridge approaches. But the sub-ridge ascent is good for another reason as well. So you've got the avalanche problem. Using the sub-ridge, there's no avalanche exposure overhead. And so you can feel safe on your sub-ridge ascent. If anything breaks, it's the stuff you're breaking at your feet, and it's off one way or the other. The other nice thing that sub-ridge ascent does is it conserves fall line skiing. And so if I go back to this map, right. Oh, it's gonna get worse. Yeah, no, it's gonna get way worse. I'm gonna go all the way. Yeah. And so what you notice too, like I told you we were gonna go there. So if you notice too, if I take this nice sub-ridge, these are all the ski lines that everybody wants to ski, is down this nice fall line and into here and then lap back. While yes, you do end up in a terrain trap, you're not going to spend your time eating lunch down there. You're going to ski through it and you're going to get on your sub-ridge and you're going to move on for your day. Now, if somebody decides they don't like the sub-ridge and they walk up the gully and then put a big, wide, fat skin track right up through the middle, yeah. A, they put themselves in the exposure to the avalanche the entire way up, which, as we talked about, is a bad practice. But B, they've put a skin track through all the fall line skiing that the rest of us actually want to ski. And I've actually had this happen once on Mount Ogden's west face in Malin's Basin. A local guy that I'm friends with was doing that. And he didn't know I was there, but I was up on the ridge and I was waiting to ski the line. And because he put in this big, huge, long skin track through the middle of the skiable terrain, and I knew he was there, I sat on the ridge for 30 minutes while I waited for him to finish his ascent through the line that I wanted to ski. And he comes up around the corner and I waved to him and he kind of was like surprised to see me. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, oh, and he knew what was going on. He like apologized. I'm like, it's fine. But now that we've got this growing Ogden backcountry community with all these people, that's a situation where not only are you entering exposure and all of that stuff, but you're kind of setting yourself up for maybe someone who's a little less nice than me that might be a little more upset. I'm not looking at you. But I'm looking at you. Yeah.
That was all Biddle.
that was not you. But you can see the point, right? So we've got more and more people coming. And in that particular scenario, it's me, another guy, and this guy, and it's not that big a deal. I waited for a little while, and then we skied. But if you've got 20, 30 people on a ridgeline, if we start to become anything like Salt Lake, which is the trend we're on, that becomes a real issue and people get real mad. And conflict in the backcountry isn't really anything we really want to have. We'll get more into that later. So the sub-ridge ascent, you can see this picture, this nice, beautiful sub-ridge ascent, and it is also put in at a very comfortable 12 to 15 degrees up track. So I will say, this is something that the Ogden backcountry community does really, really, really well. Yeah. Some of the OGs in this terrain were big proponents of chill skin tracks, and I latched on to that 100%. And our friends down in Salt Lake have these real nice roads that punch right up into the terrain and get you right into the steep. And they punch these skin tracks straight up the mountain. And I completely understand why they do it, because there's a lot of people and they got to get where they're going. And they've got basically steep terrain from the road. Here in Ogden, we don't have those roads that punch us right up into the terrain. And so most of our approaches have involved some long, flat approaches, but that also means we don't have that steep right out the gate. So there's no reason we need to slam up high heel lifters and go straight up these things. Now, I get it. Every once in a while, you got to do the thing, but this is the crusty old ski guide part I told you, where my opinions do not speak for those of Ogden Avalanche or Roosters. But the thing about 12 to 15 degrees is it's very physically efficient. And I think there's some, go ahead, Cam, what do you got? It's very, very difficult. Yeah. It's very, very difficult. And that's kind of what I'm about to get to is there was, I wish I knew more about it, but there was some crazy study with the military and these 10th Mountain guys, but they figured out that this 12 to 15 degree range is kind of the Goldilocks zone for up tracks, being physically efficient and then also efficient use of your fitness from the perspective of long days with lots of distance, which we were just talking about here in Ogden. We don't have those roads that punch us right up into the terrain. A lot of our backcountry skiing involves long, flat approaches, which with a lot of distance and big, long days if you want to ski a bunch of vert in most of the Ogden backcountry that we've got. So this 12 to 15 degree thing, it seems like old crusty JT hippy dippy opinion, but it really is useful. And I was out today. Well, this is a little bit different, but I was out what I call fishing in the local pond today. I'm a big fan of fish scale skis. And this is, it's a whole weird little cult we've got. But basically, it's like a big fat powder ski with Nordic base on it. And I love them here in the Ogden Range for those big, long, flat approaches. But I went out in a zone today, and I was fishing in the local pond. And I came up, and because I wanted to keep my fish scales on all day, I really needed to hit this 12-degree mark. Otherwise, the scales start slipping, and then I got to get my skins out of my bag, and it just ruins my fishing trip. And so there's a classic skin track in this spot, and usually one of the old OGs, I call them, puts this thing in, and they put it in really well, and I can just fish scale this thing all day long, no problem. But today, I had to put in my own track because the track going out was a little steeper than people usually put it in. And I was like thinking about my rant in this section, and I'm like, yeah, this is kind of like perfect. Like because I'm seeing it more and more where we get more and more people and the Salt Lake influence and our tracks are getting steeper. And then crusty old me comes walking up and I'm like, it's too steep. But I was able to put in my own, and I had this nice little super efficient day farming these little tiny 300 vertical foot turns on my little 12-degree skin track. But what I found is I started at like 8 o'clock and I was done by noon, and I had slammed out like 2,500 vert in these tiny little laps. And I was spinning laps like crazy, but I wasn't that tired because I had this nice, efficient, fish scale, friendly skin track to lead me all the way through. And I call that my little elevator. So once I had my little elevator in, I was super efficient throughout the day, and I went pretty long and hard on this little lap with my little fish scale skin track. So the 12 to 15 degree thing, it's something we do really, really well in here, and it's something I want to press that we continue to do well. Like we all get the froth and like see the goods up high, but you're really not going to get there any faster. And if you do get there 10 minutes faster, you're going to be that much more worn out. And so you might not get the third lap or the fourth lap where you really get to take advantage of the skin track that you already put in. And you'll thank yourself later in the day for your earlier person in the day for not having put up the big steep skinner where you're kicking up high heel lifters at the end of your day. Okay. now we're going to move to this one. And this is when we go, this is why it's in red now. This is when we go to the negative side. This is when I really start getting rowdy. So there's a guy in Salt Lake of fame named Mark White. We call him Spindrift 65. This was a Instagram post, or what would it be? What do they call these? These are the reels or whatever. Anyway, yeah, the story, yeah. Corey's trying to catch me up with all this stuff. I'm still struggling. So this shows up in Mark White's post one day, and I immediately screenshot it because this skin track he's talking about is hilarious and famous. But he says, WTF, can someone explain this skin track to me? I don't get it. You guys probably can't see the skin track in the back there for you, so let me just highlight it for you. Yeah.
Nailed it.
So this is Mount Superior in Little Cottonwood Canyon, a very, very, very large mountain that has very large avalanches that cross the road and usually run like that. And so if you decide to skin up that, exposed to that, expect to get famous on Mark White's Instagram story. For all the reasons we talked about before, right? Like, route goes straight up a slide path, exposed during the entire ascent to overhead hazard. And as you can tell, a lot of people like to ski that area as well, from above to the bottom. All right, here's another one. This is actually here in Ogden. I was teaching a course the other night, and a student is there like one thing that a beginner backcountry skier can do that can like really blow themselves up that they're not really sure what they're doing? And that was a hard question for me. I was sitting there like trying to think about it, but my co-instructor who was on this course with me when I took this picture, he just chimes up from the back. He's like, if you just mid-slope your skinner right across some slide paths and through a bunch of good skiing. And he's like, he starts talking about this day. I'm like, oh, you were on this tour that day. I'm like, funny you brought that up, because on my Thursday night speech at the B Street, I've got that exact picture in my presentation. It was a little bit more of a less ranty scenario, so I didn't go too deep into it here. But now we're here doing this, I'm going there. So you can see these guys. I was out there this day. I took this picture. These guys were not from the area. They were super cool dudes. I talked to them at the end of the day, and you can't fault someone who didn't know necessarily where they were going, but it just illustrates a point, right? So this is a mid-slope ascent. These guys, most of you that know this area know that the traditional skin track keeps kind of going back further into these trees and catches this nice sub-ridge and gains the main ridge. These guys, being from out of town, didn't really know where that was, so they came up right through here. I didn't get too in depth with them on the rationale behind their choices. I was just being friendly, so I didn't really dig in. But on this spot are two slide paths that go with pretty regular consistency from time to time. You can see that crosses right through here. So they came right through the run out in this run out of one and start zone of another slide path. But again, beyond the avalanche problem, there's all these sparkly, nice ski lines that go right through here that they crossed and put this skin track right to the middle. Now, some people are like, yeah, skin track through your line, no big deal. But you work all day to get to these nice, clean lines, and then someone puts a skin track right through the middle of it. It's a little bit of a bummer. Also, if JT here is standing up on top of that ridge, waiting now for these guys to come through, maybe now I'm not quite as nice as I was that first time I waited 30 minutes for someone to skin right through the skiable lines. Here's another one from the Ogden Mountains in a spot many of you probably know. Indicator Hill up on Cutler Ridge. I came around the corner this day And these folks started here and traversed all the way across before they decided to take 3 turns and then traverse all the way out the other side. Same thing again, the avalanche problem, right? Like the big reason not to do this has, we talked about trigger points before and some institutional knowledge of trigger points. There's a little rock right here below this bush. That's like a classic trigger point for that slope. And these folks skied right through the middle of it. And then all these sparkly, fancy, beautiful ski lines that we all could have skied now have this big, huge double traverse and 3 wide turns through it as well. So these are just a few things that as the Ogden community continues to grow, these are things we should think about. And so when I talked about today my fishing in the local pond, it's another one of these kind of spots. I was going to take a picture of it, but I couldn't really get a good angle. But it's stuff we think about with other people. As more and more and more of us are getting out there, there's more and more people that want to ski these lines. And there's people that like to ski different things. Like there's someone like me who's going to be on fish scales, wiggling and giggling a turn farm on this 300 vertical foot slope. Totally. The OGs have a track that kind of cut the corner of this particular slope I was skiing today. And I come up on it and I'm like, yeah, I know this track is always here and I get it. But these guys never think about me and my little meadow skipping mission here where I'm going to wiggle and giggle these 300 vertical foot turns and they cut right across the slope. Whereas if they made 3 more kick turns and then cross on the ridge proper, then this whole little slope that I made a dozen laps on today stays nice and pristine and makes me real happy. But that's the thing of this thinking about other folks. Like these guys, I know these guys that put this track in every day, and that little slope is not even on their mind. They would never consider skiing 300 vertical feet because they're spoiled Utah guys at this point because they've been here for so long. But me coming from the Midwest is like 300 feet of unskied POW. Like, that's awesome. I will do that all day. I don't have a ton of time, and I have these sweet fish scales, and I'm going to yo-yo this meadow skip till I'm blue in the face and get down in time to get here for this talk. Plenty of time to spare. So that's just something we need to think about as we're out there in the Ogden Backcountry with all these people now. And the next time you come up on one of those slopes, you just think about me in my fish scales and my baseball cap, my sunglasses, meadow skipping his way through like it's the late 80s, wiggling and giggling. So now we'll go back to a little positive point here. Fall line descent. Yeah. Interestingly, yeah. That is Corey in the picture right there. Yeah. If you don't know those tracks, now you do. And anytime you see those tracks, you know exactly who that is. Yeah. You see mine are a little bigger. I ski a little bit faster. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Drag a hand and freeheel turn too. Just saying. So fall line descent. My mentors hammered this into my head when I was cutting my teeth in the Ogden Range, and I was like, Johnny, go hard, free skier. And they used to give me a hard time for the way I skied lines. But I even started to realize that I could still appease them with my free skiing style as long as I just kept it in the fall line. Even if I made big, huge free skiing turns, if I stayed in the straight fall line and like hit things in the fall line and wasn't all over the place, even my wiggle giggle OG mentors were happy to ski with me. And that's the real point. What's that? I know I'm older than you. Yeah, but you're crustier than I am. Hey, if anybody wants to deny that point, me, you, and Corey can powwow about it later on. But so the point here is the fall line descent, right? You affect one line, and you also leave room for other people to ride as well and have their nice clean lines just like you did. and we can all get along and we can all save skiing for each other if we have nice fall line descents. Oh, the mid-slope traverse comes back on the down as well. I looked hard for this picture. I did. I really looked really, really hard. This exact zone that Corey's making these beautiful fall line turns in, I took a picture of it. Now I can't find it for the life of me, but there was a line once. I came in to this area here called the Race Start Chutes up above Snow Basin, and someone had skied left of where Corey was, came down like 4 turns, traversed straight across, skied 3 turns, traversed again, skied 4 turns, traversed again, and skied the Mount Ogden flank. And I about had a conniption, but no.
Yeah, we've asked Vince from the community.
Yeah. I think there's more than one, but yeah. But yeah, there might have been 2. The point was, not only did he affect a bunch of different avalanche terrain, as we talk about, but he also put in lines in like every single line of race starts without skiing every single line of race starts and having just skied one. And so you can see why, as the community keeps growing and more of us are trying to do this thing, that this kind of etiquette becomes more and more problematic. Down in Salt Lake, people get crazy when you do things like that. Up here in Ogden, we don't get crazy because we have this really cool culture and everybody's chill. But if we keep getting more and more busy and more of this, people might start getting a little more crazy. Not saying I'm there, but I'm on my way. But it could look like this, which is exactly what we want to see. Yeah, look at 3 more lines in there that could be skied. That's Brandon, that's Kennedy, that's Colton, right? So then there's this other concept of stacking tracks. In the guide world, we use this a lot, especially where I guide cat skiing. We use this a lot just as inventory management. We instruct all of our guide clientele to stay what we call tight to tracks. And it's like, get your own fresh turns. Of course, get your fresh turns, but maybe get them like just far enough away from the other turns that you save some room for some other people that may show up later to get some fresh turns as well. We all get a chance to get our clean, fresh turns, and we all get to play nice together in the sandbox, and everybody's happy and everybody wins. And that brings me to my geriatric millennial, too much time with Mr. Rogers saying is be neighborly. And this is another thing we do really, really well in the Ogden community is every time I'm out and I run into people, if I know I'm great, we have a conversation, but even people I don't know, I always try to be like, hey, where are you going to be? This is where we're going to be. Oftentimes I've found down south that people don't want to answer that question because they don't want you to snake their line or whatever. And we don't have that problem yet here in Ogden, where there's still an incredible amount of good skiing, even with the way that our backcountry community has already started to grow. There's still so much. No one's going to snake your line. I have a speech I give my friends from Salt Lake every time they come up first thing in the morning. They get all jumpy and they like need to get out of the car, and I'm still drinking coffee and sitting on the tailgate with Corey. And I'm like, slow down. Welcome to the North Country. No one's going to snake your line. We're all going to get fresh turns today, and we can be chill all day. And what's really going to blow your mind is we're going to get about halfway up, and I'm going to run to some stranger, and I'm going to tell them where we're going. And they're just like, blah, like what? The point is, sometimes, and if I go back to Mark White, this actually happened to him. Sometimes these people that are out there with you that are skiing nearby are the ones who are going to come and rescue you if you have a problem. Mark White and his wife, Martha, have a story where they were out skiing in Cottonwoods, and there was a guy out solo, and they watched him take a ride, and he was solo. And when they interviewed the guy after the fact, the guy basically resigned himself that he was going to die because he knew he was solo and he was fully buried. But Mark and his wife saw it from across the way, came skiing over, performed a successful rescue, saved this guy's life. He gives them beers for Christmas every year now. But these are the situations that are going to occur out there. And these are the people who are likely going to help you with your rescue. And so it's not only just nice to be nice to people, because people like nice people. It's also good from the perspective of just knowing where each other are. And if you're going to be, say, I'm going to go ski Dead Tree Knob, and someone else is like, oh, we're going to be in the same zone. We were thinking of doing this first and then coming down there. Then not only do you know there's people in the area that can be help with a rescue, but you know where they are. And if you ski Dead Tree and you're coming up around the corner and you see them come across on the ridge, you're like, oh, yeah, that's that guy or that girl I was talking to earlier. They're going to ski that line probably right there, so I can be out of their way over on this nice sub-ridge ascent that I'm putting in at 12 to 15 degrees of awesomeness, right? And so we even talk about this in rescue courses and stuff where you shout out your numbers while you're going through your beacon. Because if Colby is skiing a line right next to me and he hears me yell Avalanche and my partner is doing a search and he's yelling his numbers, when Colby comes up on the scene, he knows exactly what's going on because the people in the rescue are doing what they're doing, and he knew that we were there to begin with, and so he comes over and he helps out. And from my perspective, that is just good culture. And this is kind of the take-home point that I want to end on is we have a really great culture in the Ogden Range right now, and we have for many years, but we are starting to feel the pressure of more people, and we're in this little inflection point where we could go either way. We could be this really great welcoming culture that helps new people come into the area, helps them learn where they want to go, and like helps them figure out how to do things the way we do them here and properly and things of that nature. Or we can go the other direction of severe localism. We have a little localism, you know, that is what it is. But severe localism where we don't have this welcoming culture and we don't have this situation where people come in and they get defensive and then they just do whatever they want. And so one thing I've learned as a ski guide is when you bring people into the fold, they have a tendency to be more open to advice and suggestion when you say, your skin track's too steep and you went right up the middle of the cemetery. And if you're on the other end of that spectrum, they get defensive and they just say right here and go do whatever they want. And so this is not only a way that we can have a nice, friendly culture that everybody enjoys being a part of, but it's also a way that we can pass down these etiquettes and these things that we all value in our terrain to the new people that are coming along. Because there's a saying that I stole from a UAC podcast, and it builds off of anything, but it says culture eats training for breakfast. And so like people come take courses from Corey and Ben and I and stuff, and we can teach them all day long. But if our culture doesn't support those kinds of behaviors and those kinds of etiquette, then it's not going to take hold the way that we want. And it's not going to be an inclusive scenario where we bring people into the fold and have them have a better experience and do things the way that are appropriate for the situation. And they're not just out there on their own. And so I think that's kind of how I want to finish, is just saying that as we grow and we think about these things and this new situation we find ourselves in, let's make sure we all choose to go that way with our culture, because culture builds character. And I know we have a lot of characters in the Ogden Backcountry community, but we want to build a good character so that people that come in feel like they're coming into a community that's here to help and that's here to help people figure out how to navigate these mountains and how to do it in a way that is beneficial for everybody, including all of us that have been here for all these years. So with further ado, I'll raise a glass to the Ogden Backcountry community that welcomed me 25 years ago, and looking forward to welcoming more and more folks as we grow here in Ogden. Thank you. If you have any questions, I guess we can do that, or should you just? Anybody have any pressing questions? Cam? One at a time. Death in the mountains?
Jesus.
Yeah, man, we're going to go deep. No, I get you. Hey, I kind of like when I talked a little, and I do this all the time in my Area 1 courses, especially just to like shake students up a little bit. But, it's kind of, one of those things. Corey gives Cam a hard time for bringing it up, but it happens. The mountains are a really, really dangerous place, and it's going to happen. It's happened here before, and it's going to happen here again. Corey and I have talked about it at times in the past where we think about how at some point one of someone that we taught an avalanche course to is probably going to die in an avalanche, and then how are we going to feel when that happens? And it's the stark reality of this thing that we choose to do, and there's really no way around it. And like I kind of tongue in cheek about a lot of these things, but it's a very real situation. And when you think about Wilson Glades and that avalanche and that problem and the 3 people that were killed that were walking up, like this is real life stuff that we deal with. And I might get mad at you for holding up my line for 30 minutes with your mid-slope ascent, but I'll really get mad at you if you do a mid-slope ascent and get caught in an avalanche and I dig out your dead body and have to tell your wife and kids or whatever about what happened. You hate to go dark like that, but that's real life. And if we choose to be out there together, these are the situations we're in, which is, again, why the community thing is such a big deal, because I've seen it happen with a good friend of mine in the past here in Ogden. And it's the community that comes together and rallies around that situation as well. And so it's the community that's going to rally around to prevent that situation from happening. And it's also the same community that's going to rally around together when it does happen and cry on each other's shoulders and figure out what we do next. So anybody got another question? Maybe that's not about die. There's one. Oh. All right, now we're going to go real deep. She said Aaron Rodgers. I told you it was the predominant religion. No, I'm just kidding. He'll be back. Cam's got another one. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, the emergency snack. Yeah, Cam wants to know what my emergency snack is. It's goo, unfortunately. That's not even like fantastic at all. It's goo. And you know how old that goo is right now? It's in my emergency kit. You would only want that goo if you're dying.
You got a weird question. I love a beer any day.
Okay.
I love a beer on the slope.
Yeah.
And all my buddies, we always drink beer at the summit. You have a beer. And
Yeah, Summit beer.
I feel like that's fine.
Yep.
In area, I never heard anything about it, but obviously.
It's a Colorado thing.
Yeah. Summit beer is completely appropriate.
As long as it's deep
Yeah.
slab.
What's that?
As long as it's deep.
As long as it's a Rooster's deep slab. No, I'm cool. I a lot of my friends, I'm not a giant drinker. I don't drink much on slope, but I'm down with a Summit beer any day. Yeah. I mean, if the homeboy's getting hammered drinking whiskey in the skin track, then I'm not looking at you. I swear to God. Then maybe we take it easy a little bit, but yeah, I like to party. Anybody else got anything?
No.
There's one way back. One more. Oh yeah, fish scales. So I really should sell these things, quite honestly, because everywhere I go, I'm promoting the gospel of fish scale skis. I'm a Volet ambassador, and Volet has a wide variety of pattern-based skis. So I have an older pair that's the Charger BC, which they currently don't make, but I'm trying to pull some strings right now to get that one back. But then I also have a V6 BC. I also have an Ultra Vector BC. And that's what my quiver over the years has gotten shorter, but it's also gotten where I have like a daily driver flat bottom ski and a daily driver fish scale ski. Short and snappy flat bottom ski, short and snappy fish scale ski. Because I love them. And it's a variety of things, right? It's the long flat approach and all of that. But it's also, I found, like I do bombing routes on the Monument Ranch and stuff when they used to let me wear my fish scales. I found it really beneficial to be on fish scales because I can just shuffle around. It's the shuffle factor that like I didn't even think of when I first got them. Or like when we were talking about skiing a line and then you've got your safe zone, like you got greedy and took it 2 turns too deep and can't quite get back up to your safe zone. With fish scales, you just walk right up to your safe zone, no big deal. Where then your alpine buddies are sidestepping up the hillside trying to get up there, and I just like shuffled right up there. Or like the ribbon at Snow Basin off the back, my buddies are all sidestepping, and I'm just fish scaling right up in there, no big deal. But yeah, Volet, they're the stuff. Cam. Yeah, Cam bringing up Benny Boy. Yeah, Cam brings up Ben Geiger, was a local, he's a legend now, but he was my backcountry touring partner, passed away a few years back. It was one of those deals where life stuff happens. He had a heart attack when he was laying stone on his job. But he was like my touring partner. Yeah, it's my touring partner. We used to take a lot of risks together, and so we always talked about like what we would do if we ever got caught in an avalanche or whatever. And unfortunately, he had a regular death and I had a heart attack. But he was a local legend here. And if you ever go up to James Peak, up Potter Mountain, his brothers built a little statue up there that it's not just about Ben, it's about the backcountry community in general as well. And to just have a little reminder that this is a pretty cool thing we do every day. And we're all pretty fortunate and pretty lucky to do what we do. And Ben loved it as much as anybody. And we kind of do those things for him now. And he brings us atmospheric rivers. Anything else before I start crying and shit? Good. Well, if you want to get in touch with me, feel free. These are all my contact stuff. And I'm happy to beta share and all that kind of stuff with friends. So, but I won't publish it on the internet. So, yeah, send me a direct message. Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it.